Hello and welcome to Enterprise 2020, brought to you by Symantec Cloud and Bloomberg Television India. My name is Ashwin Raghunath and I'll be your host this evening. And joining me is Bjorn Engelhardt. Welcome to India, Bjorn, who is the Vice President of Strategic Sales and Cloud for the team responsible for Symantec's product sales and strategy across Asia Pacific and Japan. Now, we understand that the biggest chunk of a company's intellectual property resides in your emails, almost 70 to 80% of your email. And securing this data, well, security is really as strong as the weakest link. Now, over the next half an hour, we intend to explore the challenges, the threats that exist across this landscape, look at email as a tool which can increase your productivity and make you safer, and look at the threats that you could be anticipating in the future. Now, we're going to be splitting our discussion into 5 large divisions. We're going to be looking at the landscape and the evolution of threats. We'll be going to be focusing on threats and, importantly, advanced, persistent threats and targeted attacks. We'll be looking at email, the ways of securing, retrieving them, and archiving them. A focus on cloud as it has already gained a lot of importance, and also look at social engineering, which has proven to be a huge threat when it comes to data retention inside company. Also, the trend of BYOD, bring your own device and bring your own everything, how you can ensure that this is a tool that aids your productivity and is not a security hazard. And finally, a bit of looking around the corner. Where are threats headed to? How are you securing yourself? To start this evening off, I'd like to ask Bjorn to take over.
Ashwin, thank you, and to our guests here, thank you for making the time. So, I spend a lot of time talking to customers about the security landscape, and I think one thing that's become very clear is that we are under attack as a society, whether it's us as individuals or whether it's us as companies. And we're seeing a wide-ranging change in attack vectors out there. It used to be that people would hack into our websites, post some kind of cyber graffiti up there to say, I managed to get through your security defenses, and then generally walk away. But what we're seeing is that change, and I'm sure all of you as security professionals and information technology professionals are seeing that actually detecting those threats has become a lot more difficult, and the nature of those threats has changed to like the nuisance value to actually trying to steal information and actually derive value out of that information. Some of these threats are becoming harder to detect. They're using different mechanisms. They're using social engineering, as Ashwin talked about, which preys upon us, our vulnerabilities as individuals, where we actually want to communicate with people and share information and trust people. What we all need to do as professionals is understand what are these people after. They're after information that they can create value from. They're after our customer records. They're after our intellectual property. They're after anything that will give them a competitive advantage or give them a political advantage as well. And we generally see that the landscape is split between people who are trying to attack you for financial reasons or for political reasons. But it's an exciting time in the security space. I think it's a potentially dangerous time. And I'm looking forward to the discussions tonight where we really get into some of the issues that's particularly impacting India. I think India is one of those emerging markets that we're seeing where is now feeling the brunt of a lot of these global attacks as well, and rising to the forefront. It's not just an American or a UK or an Australian type of issue. It is now a global issue where people from anywhere in the world can attack India and actually do some serious impact.
Cool. Thanks, Bjorn. Very interesting, bunch of sectors out here. We have pharma, banking and finance, IT and telecom, utilities, telecommunications. We have, the creative side of, advertising. I'd just like to understand, basically get an overview as to what is the landscape and what are the kind of threats you're particularly facing. I'd like to start off with Tata AIG. Mr. Sanjay, what are the kind of threats that you face on a daily basis, which you've had to spend a lot of efforts, largely marketing efforts in trying to educate people, but also trying to ramp up on the backside?
Traditionally, we have been very good at securing our perimeter, and deploy some tools, and we feel that we are okay. Now, increasingly, what's happening is we have applications which are exposed not just to our employees, but to our partners, to our channels, to our customers, and that's what is bringing additional threats as far as the applications are concerned. Whether our applications are secure enough to handle all those threats, that's what we need to introspect and try to ensure that they do comply. And apart from that, we are also seeing that data or information privacy and the concerns regarding information privacy and information security are becoming increasingly important as far as the threats which are concerned. Because people, I feel personally that increasingly are going to look for financial information, as we move forward in the years.
Interesting, talking about spend, Mr. Muralidharan from SBI's side, I'm sure there's a lot of common elements, but as a CFO, how much of securing is, how much of it is a nightmare for you to having to provision?
Right now, I am placed in the investment banking arm of SBI, wherein there are 3-4 basic issues which we always face. Here, for a change, we deal in email. All our decisions, all our information, all our things goes through email. That's one of the greatest challenge. We have to keep the email under check. So definitely we have a Symantec for that firewall in place. Secondly is the data transfer. The data transfer, if I had gone to one conference there, they showed me how a data can be stolen easily. A picture moves from one process to other process, where all the firewall doesn't permit them to move around, and finally that data also goes with them. So such type of cyber forensic which we are really worried about now, because my company is a database company, where everything happens in database. Because mostly the advisory functions, because as an investment banker, what we do advisory. Advisory for a project, advisory for a merchant acquisition, advisory for some structuring, advisory for other things. So all of us are most of our process are in data. So the data is very critical to us, and it can go to anybody. So we are very much bothered about the data. And the third part which we always see is the information business. Because we are an information company. Anything has to happen in a paper, has to happen first to us, and paper should come next. So we got a huge load of informations. Our issues always will be that whenever we do all these things, archival. How long we can archive, and what data we can put it in one archival, and how far they will be continued over a period of time. So those are challenges we are rightly facing. So I would always say that we need to be guarded always. Take new application, new systems wherever possible, and see a test of it, how it works.
I'd like to bring the telcos in, Venkatesh and Alpana. There was a story about a year and back or 2 years back when one of the biggest American, telecommunications company lost a lot of data about its subscribers. Now, that is a huge problem that you're likely to be facing. What are the issues that you're facing, and how are you securing this data?
I will say that, certainly we are in a digital world. We are not in an analog world. Absolutely, that is the current state of affairs. Therefore, even though, yes, there are expected to be attacks, there are expected to be threats from all over the place, but equally, I think the tools and technologies, there is enough awareness that we are evolving along with it. And the deeper and the harder we investigate and invest in it, that's where we'll be a lot more secure. So how, as a telco, I would say that we are facing it is, we know that we are custodians of all of our customer data. We are providers of the information grid. And therefore, when we look at some of the security threats and security aspects that are really going to trouble us, whether it is cyber attacks, or whether it is the aspect that we will use Facebook or LinkedIn or other sources of information and be storing information in our CRM systems, it is ultimately data security that is the most important thing. And I believe that with the encryption technology that exists right now and the type of enhancements at the endpoint security, and trying to make sure the perimeter is properly taken care of, that's where it's going to be a lot of intelligence that we need to put in, and we are continuously putting it in. But what we really need to watch out for is that the botnets, etc., which are actually dedicated towards making this as a target, we do rely on our ecosystem, and partners like Symantec and others have to play a key role. It cannot be that a service provider is held with that whole total responsibility. It is the partnership that will make it happen. And that's what we are banking on. That's what we rely on. We have our own intelligence. Obviously, for the required reasons, all of that cannot be shared, but clearly that's how we are trying to protect ourselves.
Venkatesh?
one of the threats that I do see, I mean, other than what the other panelists covered, is, of course, we do have external threats, like coming in on a daily basis. We are monitoring our firewalls, and the perimeter security is very good. But there is also the insider threats which are there, and that's leading to frauds and large-scale frauds. So we got to watch out, for insiders also doing potential damage. And talking about data, I think my primary focus, is to shift from a device and network-centric security strategy to a data-centric security strategy. And the reason is because the data in future is not going to be, it's going to be everywhere, it's going to be distributed. And it's again, people are not going to be, they're going to access data. People are going to access data from multiple systems and multiple places. So the crux is going to be to build the right controls around the data itself. So the metadata itself will be such that it's almost like you have to build enough controls around the data so that the data protects itself. So whether you're talking about technologies like DRM, or you could be talking about technologies like, as Alpana mentioned, encryption. So it's basically policies that are built around the data. The metadata will contain all your security policies such that it goes with the data. So I would say that as long as you follow the data, your sensitive data securely, you're golden. So I think that would be my focus, going forward.
I just want to top it with one point, which is, since all of us probably have good amount of respect for Steve Jobs, he has said it very well, that it's really, security is not a technology problem. It is a social problem. So technology cannot be expected to solve every possible problem. So the policies, the way the society, the users, all of us try to govern it, that plays a huge role.
No, but I'm curious to see how is the pharmaceutical industry protecting its data? The drug wars can be really cutthroat,
One of the most, I think, significant challenge that the pharmaceutical industry would have is the disappearing of these boundaries, these perimeters. So I think very rightly Venkatesh mentioned that the way to look at protection of data is should not be network-centric or system-centric, but should be more of data-centric. And with a huge collaboration of suppliers, vendors, distribution networks, you never know where your data is. And it's really difficult to put your data in one server and say, okay, I've put adequate controls around the application, around the data, and it is secure. So there are some tools available like IRM, DRM, which we use. Another challenge that we see is for pharmaceutical is again the intellectual property. Very rightly, about 65 to 70% of IP resides in emails. And we're talking about a drug which was conceptualized probably 15 years back, is now into production. And with the changing regulation in different countries, we now want to sell the drug in that market. And the first thing that we probably would face is a pre-litigation or a litigation where we are asked to prove that, yes, this was conceptualized by us. Yeah. And for that, the most important thing is how do I go back 15 years, collect all the relevant emails, put them in a structured form, and present it to the court. So these are some of the challenges that I think are very relevant.
Point of archiving.
Well, it is an interesting point, and I think I've been in this information management space, particularly around email, for the last 10 years, and I think I got a sense maybe 5 years back that people were tiring of the messages email was important. Email was important from a security perspective and a retention perspective. I think you're validating the point. It's come back that from a threat perspective, one of the primary threat vectors that people use to attack us is still email. It's the easiest way to get into an organization. Doesn't matter what boundaries we put on security, we put around it, people will still try. And so I guess one of the conversations for tonight is how can we better secure emails? I think the retention piece has become more critical. I'm seeing in India, whether it's the RBI, whether it's from a government perspective, whether it's just internal best practice, how do I retain those emails? And not only how do I retain them, how do I find them quickly and adequately, because there is so much intellectual property sitting in those emails.
2/3 of all mail that goes out is spam, yet the biggest productivity tool in your offices is email. How are you securing the email infrastructure within your companies? What are the strategies that you're using? And yeah.
So for example, I mean, we are now completely on cloud worldwide. Okay. So these are being hosted centrally by a very large company in the premises. And so the security part itself, archiving, security, maintaining, everything has been outsourced to them. So there is a complete paradigm shift completely from each office actually archiving, securing, taking it to the banks, storing, done, not done, some auditor checking, not checking. All those kinds of things have now moved to one single location in that sense of as a responsibility. But that doesn't take away your worries that they are secure or not. So therefore, there are practices in place, procedures in place that not only they are archived, they are also retrieved and checked very often whether they work or not, because that is very important. When there is a problem, you want to retrieve everything back. Now what used to happen is each office used to lose control and the power of domain that I can retrieve, check mail and all. But we are educating people how important it is that they have to move now to a better role than what they are. So I think it has helped us quite a bit in saving a lot of manpower, saving a lot of resources, saving a lot of money as well, and saving a lot of security concerns. Other problem used to be privacy issues. For example, if my data resides in US or vice versa, let's say, I mean, there are laws which do not allow data coming from overseas into our country. But there are encryption ways, where you can encrypt data and it is not actually physically my name going, it is going in bits. Yeah. So, there are beautiful ways to do it. So I think that is quite helping us.
Security is the heart of each of our operations, and to have to completely depend as an outside entity, how well do you know the entire environment? Like we said, it's more than technology. So I can see that it's important to have that extra broader bandwidth from that angle, so when the attacks are happening or something else is happening. It's equally important to have that inside knowledge. So I think we'll talk over it.
In a non-case scenario, like when you're not on cloud, when it's not JWT, when you haven't migrated onto that platform, how are you managing it?
But whatever the security you put it, that is not enough under any circumstances. And you must remember that each and everything has a cost. So there are a lot of companies, medium-sized, small-sized companies, may not be able to afford it. Now earlier, there is a hacker who used to try to destroy the data or pull out the data. Today, there is a ethical hacker. Which ethical hacker they are doing? They have been recruited from the Premier Institute of IIT or some other institute, and they are doing job on that to protect it. So the more the day will go, the more some sort of new things will come, counter new things will come. So there is no end of it. Yeah. But threat will be always there, and counter to that always we'll have to tackle it. So
but sticking.
So from a perimeter perspective, there are basic protections. For email, there are perimeter protections, right. Like there will be a spam filter, and then there will be an antivirus. So those things would take care of maybe a good portion, because the other thing is like 90% of your email is spam. So you got to block those at the perimeter itself. What still concerns me is, again, what I started with earlier is the data, because that email is not only accessible within your organization on your company laptops, but you have exposed that email also over the web. Yeah. So now it is accessible in mobile devices, it's accessible everywhere. So as I said, the focus now shift has to move towards you got to follow the data. Yeah. If you are worried that it's not everything in email is sensitive. It's only so you got to focus. If you can again nail down where your sensitive data is and put controls around it, then you will be in a much better position.
Rallying resources.
So so to address this one, probably one could be rights management system. Rights management. That's right. So that's what we are actually very seriously looking at, whether that can be implemented.
But all of that comes back to a policy. So technology is a great tool to enable your policies and your security risk assessments as well.
Quick focus on managing malware on mobiles, like we were discussing a while back. Mobile device management is only going to get compounded and worse, because it's not just 2 OSs or 3 OSs, because we already see a couple of OSs in the pipeline. So and add a few versions to that again, and add a couple of variations to that again, you have got a fantastic headache pill on your table. How are you approaching it? What are your strategies?
Actually, lots of freeware we usually try to download. And along with that, the many malwares are introduced in the smartphones or smart gadgets. And those malwares, intention of those developers, I think it should go through a proper check. So whatever they are introducing, and that is really creates. And I just did a study on this one, and I found that lots of your information from your smartphones are captured and transferred by those.
There was a great piece of malware that said, get solar power on your mobile, a solar power meter for your mobile phone.
Correct.
What do? You download it saying, I'm going to get solar power on this. It's telling you the little needle's going up and down. In the meantime, it's sitting behind stealing the information.
Every app that you want to download on your hand device is asking for permissions to access all your data. And people blindly give it without realizing.
And so here's the reason why you don't want to manage the device. You want to manage your information, to your point. You want to segregate corporate information, personal information, lock and wrap your corporate information away, wrap it around so it's encrypted, so no other applications can get into it. You can't afford to do anything else.
In fact, this is one area where I definitely feel the MDM solution and the features that MDM you can bring to the table through that will be a big...
So move to MAM, Mobile Application Management. So move that one step further.
Yes. Very good.
And Alpana, if you're doing the 5-6 month project on MDM, it's worth spending a month on the planning. I mean, make sure you got your policies, make sure you do it right, involve people, involve your HR. Everything is important. You cannot run this yourself. You need consensus, you need support of your management and the entire team.
My only concern to this is
it's a month. I mean, it's like a 5-month exercise.
To secure our data, we are always told that we should have a data classification in place, right? That's the first step, probably, right? How many of us have actually done a proper job of classifying our data? And in various levels, and planning our data security as per that.
It's been very interesting, the kind of themes that have emerged in this discussion. So thank you very much once again, and now ask Bjorn to do the closing notes for this evening.
Look, thank you, Ashwin. I think just briefly, I think to me, it's one of the most exciting times to be an information technology professional. We're probably at one of the biggest inflections in the industry for a long time, maybe since we moved to, the networks was actually created many years back. We're looking at big data, we're looking at cloud computing, we're looking at mobile, all happening at the same time. And it's all of our jobs to make sure that this works for our organizations, that we're actually leveraging this for the benefit of the organization, that we're creating a platform for the future of whether it's for our businesses, whether it's for our children as well. And to me, security, it's an important topic, but it shouldn't be, again, that burden. We talk about it has to be enabler. It has to be think about the way we all work in everyday part of life, whether it's physical security, whether it's cyber security, whether it's at home, whether it's at a corporate level. So I think, I think all of you sound like you've got some great ideas and perspectives on it, and really appreciate the time, and thank you for the, the discussion tonight.
Thank you very much.